So far, the visibility of AsiaTEFL has only been through its annual conferences and through its publications in the Journal of AsiaTEFL and through the AsiaTEFL book series. This webinar series will provide greater visibility all the year round to AsiaTEFL.
AsiaTEFL Webinar Series is a realization of aspiration to meeting together for academic development and promoting friendship despite this pandemic. Professor Kanakumaran Subramaniam has initiated this project and he has put lots of efforts on this. His devotion should be appreciated. I hope that everyone participating in webinar series will get engaged and further stimulated in each webinar.
A very good morning, afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are right now, and welcome everyone. It's such a great pleasure for me to be here and have this opportunity to welcome all of you to the second AsiaTEFL webinar today. My name is Tanvir Kosekon, one of the committee members of AsiaTEFL Webinar Series 2022, and I will be the moderator for this webinar. I hope you have enjoyed watching the short video clip on the AsiaTEFL Professional Network webinar series, which was played earlier. Please allow me to share more information about AsiaTEFL webinar series. AsiaTEFL Webinar Series 2022 will take place every 2 months on the last Saturday of the month, which means we hold 5 webinars in total this year. One was held in March, one today, and the next webinars will be held in July, September, and November. I'm delighted to let you know that there are more than 843 people from about 30 countries around the world who registered their interest in attending this webinar. There is a surge in participation from Indonesia, followed by Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand, and participation from many other countries. We are certainly proud to be part of this diverse and vibrant ELT community that welcomes everyone. Before we start the webinar, I would like to highlight a very important issue. We are delighted to inform you that we will provide a free certificate for everyone who is attending this webinar. Therefore, you will need to complete a form. We will give you more information about it, so please stay tuned and wait until the end of the webinar. Right now, let's get started. The theme for today's webinar is Augmenting the Pedagogical Landscape in ELT, Contextualizing the Trends. We have invited 3 speakers who are experts in their own fields and are passionate about sharing their expertise and experiences on current trends in ELT. Before we meet our invited speakers, I would like to invite Professor Kil-Yong Lee, Joint President of AsiaTEFL, to deliver the official welcoming speech. Please welcome our President, Professor Kil-Yong Lee.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon and good morning to those who are still in the morning time zone. And maybe to Professor Newton, maybe I should say good evening to you. Well, thank you very much for your participation. And I'd like to extend my warmest welcome to all of you participating in the second webinar of 2022 of AsiaTEFL webinar series. Well, as I mentioned in the video, this webinar series was initiated by Professor Kanakumaran Subramaniam, who passed away 2 years ago. And after he passed away, Professor Pragasit Stithko took it over, and he started the new webinar series last year, and they were quite successful with more than 1,000 registrants in each seminar. And then the success continues this year. And then I have been informed that we had more than 850 registrants for this webinar. I think that this success is attributed to the webinar team's hard work. And I also like to appreciate Professor Pragasi Sittikul and Professor Sunyu Chai and Professor Savika Verapor and all team members for their tremendous efforts. Today we have three distinguished scholars in this webinar. Professor Willie Runandia, Singapore, and Professor Jonathan Newton, New Zealand, and Professor Chu Sung Lee, Hong Kong. They are all productive scholars, and I'm sure that we can get a lot of takeouts from this webinar series. The theme here in this webinar is augmenting the pedagogical landscape in ELT, contextualizing the trends. It seems a very interesting theme to all of us. I think that we can enjoy everything they are talking about in this webinar. Well, thank you again for your participation, and I hope that you enjoy this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kil Yong, for your warm welcome speech. I have a few announcements to make before we continue, since there are more participants joining us now. Once again, a gentle reminder to those who have not registered for this webinar, you can do so now using the link sent in the chat box or the QR code shown on the screen. Thank you. And regarding your questions for our speakers today, you may send in your questions via Mentimeter. You'll be given the link, or you could scan the QR code that will be displayed on the screen to post your questions through Mentimeter. We will select your questions and have our speakers answer them during the Q&A session just before we end our webinar. Now, please let me inform you about the format of the webinar. Our webinar has only one round. Each speaker will be given 20 minutes to present. After our three speakers have completed their presentations, there will be a Q&A session for 15 minutes. Without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, Dr. Willie A. Renandaya. He is a language teacher educator with extensive teaching experience in Asia. He currently teaches applied linguistics courses at the National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. He has given more than 100 keynote presentations at international ELT conferences and published extensively in the area of second language education. Dr. Willie A. Renanya will be sharing with us on the topic, learning to unlearn faulty beliefs and practices. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our first speaker. Over to you, Dr. Willie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. It's always good to spend a Saturday afternoon with a lot of people in the audience, good friends from Korea, from Malaysia, from Hong Kong, and from many, many other places. Always gives me a great pleasure to be around friends, especially very good friends. From Korea, Ji Hyun Jeon, former president, Joo Kyung Park, Aslam Khan, Keo Young Lee, and also former president, the founder of AsiaTEFL, Professor Lee. Greeting to you. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to share with you a very interesting topic, but at the same time, it's a little bit tricky because I'm going to spend time discussing with you some of the beliefs and practices in ELT, which to me is problematic. So I'm going to share with you why these are problematic and how we can, go about thinking about how we can, adopt new beliefs and new practices in English language teaching. And that requires that we need to make a lot of changes to the way we do things, to the way we think about English language teaching, and also to how we approach the teaching of language in our classroom. Let me start with the most important takeaway of today's session. I think we need to look at our beliefs and practices very carefully, very critically as well, and also be willing to throw away those that are no longer useful. In other words, I'm going to invite us to think about this issue very carefully so that we can take the first step to making important changes in our practices, in the way we teach language to our students, whether in high school or whether at the university level. Change is hard at first. It's messy in the middle, but it's wonderful towards the end. Let me share with you what I have seen very often being reported in the newspapers about students who continue to struggle in their process of learning English, either in school or in colleges. You can fill in the name of the country. You can apply to your country, to my country, to anyone's country. But what all these countries have in common is that there's quite a bit of a concern that what we have done is not, bearing fruit, in the sense that we have not been able to get our students to improve their level of proficiency. And because of that, there is, there are ways, there are things that governments have been doing in order to, upgrade the English language skills of the students and also of the teachers. In other words, we are facing the same classic problem of low proficiency among many of our students. Malaysia, Thailand, many other places, including Singapore as well. But the response from stakeholders, from policymakers, from government officials, and sometimes from us as well is very interesting. Now, here are some of the responses that I often see, which I'm going to share with you. Please nod your head if you agree. Number one, hey, one of the problems is because we start late. So maybe we should start teaching English at a very young level, at the kindergarten level, or maybe even before the babies are born. Number two, hey, maybe we should invite more native speakers because they can do, a better job. Or my favorite is this one, teach our students more grammar. So today I'm going to share with you at least 5 beliefs and practices that I think we need to relook very carefully. And these are the 5 things that I'm going to share with you. Number 1, to do with grammar. Number 2, to do with vocabulary. The next one, to do with how we choose text for teaching purposes. Number 4, the role of strategies in language learning, in language development. And number 5, a classic issue of whether and to what extent we want to help our students to develop native-like fluency in their language learning process. Let me begin the first one, grammar. When students can't speak well, the response is very often, teach them more grammar. When they can't write very well, and very often the response again is the same, teach them more grammar. When they don't like English lessons, Tanbir, teach them more grammar. It's a very classic response. And when they don't do well on examinations, teach them more grammar. I think there's something here that we need to really rethink about our typical responses that we often hear from people, from experts, from policymakers and all that. I have nothing against grammar, but we need to be very careful about the kind of grammar that we are teaching our students. Let me summarize what I know about grammar in relation to the process of language learning. There are 2 types basically. Number 1 is explicit grammar knowledge. And this number 1 is, I think, a major issue because we often spend way too much time focusing on explicit grammar knowledge, telling the students, explaining to the students all the wonderful grammatical rules and discourse rules to our students, hoping that one day they'll be able to make use of this grammar that they have learned explicitly in the classroom. I don't think that should be the way to go. Yeah, so my response to that is, yes, we can teach a little bit of this, but let's do less of this, not more. I don't think more is the answer. I think we should do less of the teaching of this type of grammar. I would suggest we focus more on the number 2, teaching implicit knowledge of the grammar of the language. Now, this is the kind of grammar that is usually acquired quite incidentally when students are immersed in meaning-making activities, in comprehension, in meaningful activities, usually through being exposed to a lot of reading and a lot of listening. I think we should do a lot more of number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say this again. Grammar is important, but the kind of grammar that we need to focus more on is the number 2, implicit grammar of the language. If you're looking for something to help you become more convinced, now here is a quote from a second language researcher or second language acquisition researcher. Yeah, and let me read to you very carefully the ability. If that is our goal in language learning, in language teaching, if our goal is to help the students to become able to produce language communicatively for various purposes, I think we need to develop this implicit knowledge, because your ability to speak and to write draws heavily. Now, the key word is heavily on implicit knowledge, not on explicit knowledge. Explicit knowledge comes a bit later, when you are monitoring your performance, when you are looking at your written product maybe, and then when you make changes because you find some mistakes somewhere there. So that would be number 1. Yeah, grammar, grammar, grammar. I don't think we should be teaching more grammar. I think we should be teaching less of the kind of grammar that we normally teach in the classroom. Number 2, ladies and gentlemen, is vocabulary. Now, for some reason, vocabulary, when you ask people about vocabulary, they will all say, yes, it's very important. But in reality, when you walk into the classroom, grammar is very, very often neglected. Vocabulary is very often neglected, to the extent that we have the feeling that people may think, or many teachers think, that words are not that important. It's often neglected in favor of grammar. And when it is taught, it's very taught, in a very decontextualized manner. And the focus also is on basic, superficial dictionary meaning. Very little focus on the pragmatic meaning of words in context. And that, I think, is a bad thing, because it is the last point that is very important for the students to learn. When words are used in rich, meaningful context, chances are higher that the students may be able to use this kind of words later for meaningful communication, for speaking, and also for writing. Now, here's what I've learned from the research literature. There's a very strong correlation between vocabulary and language skills. I think we need to keep saying this until teachers actually believe that this is perhaps one, or if not the most important things that the students need to learn. The ability to speak, your ability to write, the ability to understand language depends very, very heavily on the number of words that you know. Yeah, now here's again a quote from Alderson, a testing specialist. Language ability is to quite a large extent a function of vocabulary size. The more words you know, the better. I think that is what the what research is telling us. Let me share with you, this is a very complex study that I saw recently, published recently in Language Learning. Language Learning is one of those big journals in our field that publish only very, very complex type of study. Now, the researcher here is interested in understanding the relationship between listening comprehension, so that is the dependent measure, and a whole bunch of variables, including this. A whole bunch of cognitive strategies, processing capacity, metacognitive abilities, and many other factors that have been shown to be related to students' ability to comprehend spoken text. The finding is very interesting. Look at this. Yes, all these things are related to in some way, but the most powerful, the most important variables, only 2. Number 1 is topic, whether or not you're familiar with the topic of the listening materials. And number 2, whether or not you have sufficient vocabulary. And of these two, which one is more important? I think the figure is quite small there. Vocabulary is the most important, the most critical, the most powerful predictor of students' comprehension. I think you can extend the finding here to other aspects, other areas of language learning, like reading comprehension, for example. I will not be surprised if students' comprehension also depends very heavily on these two things, their knowledge of the words and also their knowledge of the world. Again, this is what we know from research. For communication, for social purposes, for writing email messages, for having a social conversation, for example, I think students need about 2,000 words. For reading non-technical text, for writing non-technical text, about 5,000 more or less. And roughly about 8,000 words if you want to engage in more complex language processing, like writing academic text or reading highly technical text, for example. In other words, we know that size is important, but research also tells us that the quality of the words that you learn is also very important. Quality here refers to the depth of your vocabulary knowledge, how well you know those words. Can you use those words for speaking? Can you use those words for writing? Can you use those words in informal situations, in formal situations, and all that? So that refers to the quality. And quality, again, is very often neglected in the teaching of vocabulary. Number two. Now, number three. We're getting there. Altogether, I have 5, yeah? So keep counting. We are into number 3 now. 3 more to go. Text. This refers to teaching materials. Teaching materials. Remember, when it comes to selecting teaching materials for our students, reading passages or listening passages, keep in mind that content is the most important consideration. There you go. I still remember this quote from many years ago: in the absence of interesting and emotionally appealing text, very little is possible. I think if you've been teaching for a while in school, I think you understand why students are not interested in your reading lesson, in your language or English lessons, because the materials are not interesting. The materials are not emotionally engaging. Yeah. Again, research tells us very clearly that when materials are engaging emotionally and cognitively, chances are higher that the students will be more willing to spend more cognitive effort into the learning process. So that is one aspect of the materials. Number 1 is the content. Number 2, equally important, because we are dealing with students of different ability level. They're still developing their language proficiency. I think we need to take a look at this very, very closely. Essentially, there are 3 different types of materials. Number 1, materials at the student's comfort zone. They can read independently without any problem. Number 2, materials at the student's stretch zone, also known as their learning zone, within their proximal, zone of proximal development. And number 3 is the panic zone. You should not be using text of number 3. Panic means it's just way too difficult. Yeah. Tanbir, can I ask you a question? Which one is best for language learning? Tricky question, yeah? Please don't say number 3. Number 3 is a bad answer. So choose either number 1 or number 2. Please say number 2.
I would say a mixture of comfort and stretch. So.
I like that. I like that, yes. Yes, I think Tanbir is a very smart teacher. Okay, now the middle one, the stretch zone. This is what happens. And because of this, a lot of teachers fall in love with this type of materials. The text must contain new vocabulary. The text must contain new grammar. The text must present new contents. Why? That's what you do in the classroom. You need to present new things. Otherwise, you won't have anything new to teach to your students, yeah? So Tanbir is right. Yes, we should be using this type of materials. But I think we should not neglect the use of the first type of materials, comfort zone materials, easy, familiar text. They serve very important purpose, not no purpose in language learning. Now, here is what I've learned from the research literature. Yeah, easier texts are wonderful texts. Number 1, I think we know from research, from theory of language learning, that comprehensible input is critically important in language learning. Comprehensible means easy, means accessible. It's within the student's level. Number two, another important point, it is a great source of implicit grammar. If you teach new things all the time, students will not be able to be exposed to, familiar language, familiar grammatical structures that they are more likely to acquire during that process. It's also a great source of deeper vocabulary knowledge. Remember what I said earlier on about quality of vocabulary, yeah? So easy text is a great source of that kind of knowledge because you get to see how the words are used in different contexts, but always in familiar language. And that is when learning, language acquisition takes place wonderfully. And the last one, I think you know this. Learning requires a lot of consolidation. Learning requires a lot of restructuring as well. And that is only possible when the students are seeing easy, accessible materials on a regular basis. Number four, Aslam. Number four, my favorite topic, learning strategies, yeah? Strategy is like a magic bullet for language learning. I think we should rethink our belief about learning strategies. Now, here are some of the reasons. Number one, good language learners use a lot of strategies. Yes, I think we have seen that. It's been reported in the literature. Number two, poor language learners, those who are not very proficient, they don't use a lot of learning strategies. And research also tells us very clearly, Aslam, please say yes, positive associations between strategy use and proficiency. Yes, I've seen that a lot.
Yes.
So much so that, strategy researchers or strategy scholars have this piece of advice. Read this very carefully. This is like, wow, strategies is a magic bullet. They just teach your students strategies and they will do wonderful things. Look at this. Learners' tool for active, conscious, purposeful, attentive learning, and they pave the way toward greater proficiency, learner autonomy, self-regulation, almost everything under the sun, basically. I think we need to think about this very carefully. I don't think it is justifiable to make such a big claim. Yeah.
Dr. William, just a gentle reminder. There's two more minutes left. Thank you.
Very good. I'm almost there. Okay, here's my take on learning strategies. Yes, there's a lot of correlation, but I think we also know that correlation is not causation. The fact that two things are related from a correlational point of view doesn't mean that one is causing the other to happen. Yeah. In other words, number one, number two, strategies that we have seen may not be causing higher proficiency in our students. May not be the case. We don't know. Because it is also possible that it is when the students are at the higher level of proficiency, then they are able to use all these wonderful strategies. I am more inclined to interpret the research in relation to number three, that it is when the students are already at the higher level of proficiency that they can, produce, they can use, they can deploy a lot more strategies. Yeah. So my take again is it okay then to teach listening strategies? The answer is yes, it is okay. And beautifully say yes, it is okay. But go easy on it. Go easy. That's a key word. Training or strategy training is no replacement to basic language learning processes. I don't think that should be the case. Now here is again a quote. You always need somebody to back you up, yeah? Now, Daniel Willingham here is a cognitive scientist, somebody who studies the brain, how our mind processes information and all that. And he has written a lot about reading, the processes of reading. And this is what he says. Yeah. Teaching reading strategies is a low-cost way to give developing readers a boost, but it should be a small part of a teacher's job. So I'm very, very surprised very often when I speak to a teacher who teaches reading or listening, and then the whole syllabus is organized around teaching students a whole bunch of strategies like predicting strategy, skimming strategies, scanning strategies, and all the other wonderful strategies. I don't think that should be the way to go. And again, this is what he said, which is what I said earlier on. Acquiring a broad vocabulary and a rich base of background knowledge will yield more substantial and longer-term benefits. Last one, Tanbir, give me 2 minutes, yeah? Okay. Native-like fluency is a gold standard. Not anymore. 30 years ago, it might be the case, but nowadays it should not be the case anymore. Point number one that I want to make and I want to share with you is this: native-like fluency is neither desirable nor achievable. I think that's a bit tricky. Desirable means if you look at me, for example, I don't want to speak like somebody from the US or from New Zealand, for example, my friend Jonathan Newton. I don't want to speak like them. Why? Because I am who I am. I want to speak the way I do, because that will show my nationality, my identity, my professionalism. So I don't think I want to, or we should, get our students to speak like native speakers of the language. And number two, from second language acquisition research, we know that it is not achievable. Not achievable. If you learn English in Korea, for example, if you learn English in Japan, in Malaysia, in Thailand, I don't think you will ever be able to get there, because of the quantity and the quality of language input is completely different. Plus, nowadays, English is an international language. Even native speakers now, this is interesting. Aslam, if you're looking for a job, like me, I will be looking for a job soon, teaching native speakers how to speak like you and me. Isn't that wonderful? This is happening, seriously. Big companies are spending money actually teaching or asking their directors to learn how to speak and understand people from different parts of the world who happen to be speaking the language. Yeah. So the standards now in relation to English as an international language is number one. Number one, when you speak, you have to be linguistically comprehensible, that people understand you. Number two, more important, I think Jonathan is probably going to talk about this, socially and culturally acceptable as well. So the notion behind intercultural competence. When I speak to Aslam, I need to understand where he's coming from, so that he will welcome me to Malaysia and buy me dinner and all the wonderful stuff. I can't just speak, suka-suka the way I like. I have to understand him very well, understand the culture. And point number three, I think it's perfectly okay for people to be bilingually and multilingually competent. And I can see that a lot of people in the audience are just people who are bilingually and multilingually competent. There's nothing wrong with that. So this is no longer a relevant question. Yeah, learning to speak from native speakers or learning to speak from non-native speakers is no longer a relevant question. I think we need to throw away this idea. Instead, we should be looking at this, whether your teacher is good, whether your teacher is effective or not effective. Yeah. If your teacher is not effective, you should hire a more effective teacher. Native or non-native doesn't matter, really. That's the end of my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. Again, 5 points. Number one, we need to rethink very carefully the beliefs and practices that we've been, keeping us back, if you like, in terms of grammar, vocabulary, in terms of choice of text, in terms of the teaching of strategies, and in terms of trying to get our students to speak like native speakers. My slides are available here. Feel free to download my slides. The QR code is there. It's completely free if you download it before the end of today. Back to you, Tanbir. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Dr. Willie, for your informative presentation. Dr. Willie shared with us his thoughts on some widely held but unsound beliefs and practices that we need to unlearn. For example, the younger, the better. Bilingual teachers are not as good as monolingual teachers. Grammar is more important than vocabulary, and replace this with ones that reflect current thinking in ELT. such as less explicit grammar teaching and more of acquiring implicit grammar knowledge, selecting new and emotionally engaging texts, and many more tips. Thank you so much once again, Dr. Willie. Ladies and gentlemen, just a quick reminder before I invite our second speaker. If you have any questions for our speakers today, please send us your questions on Mentimeter. You can scan the QR code or use the link sent in the chat box to access Mentimeter. But if you have trouble accessing Mentimeter, you can make use of the chat room on Zoom to send in your questions. We will select your questions and have our speakers answer them during the Q&A session. Now, let me introduce the next speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Jonathan Newton. He is the Program Director for the Master of TESOL and Master of Applied Linguistics programs at Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. In his career in language teacher education, he has worked alongside teachers from many countries to better understand classroom language teaching and learning, especially in relation to task-based language teaching, TBLT, teaching listening and speaking, teaching vocabulary, and teaching for intercultural capabilities. He has published more than 70 book chapters, articles, and 5 books. The topic of Dr. Jonathan Newton's presentation is less information, more insight, teacher learning on the fly in the language classroom. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Associate Professor Dr. Jonathan Newton.
Thank you very much, and thank you, AsiaTEFL, for the invitation to speak today. Actually, I got the time wrong, and I thought this was yesterday, so I was already at 6 p.m. yesterday, and I was panicking because nobody else was in the Zoom room. I thought, what's gone wrong here? So here I am back at work on Saturday, and apparently I've got the right time. It's always intimidating following Pak Willie because he's got so much to say, and it's so rich and so thought-provoking. In fact, I think we could probably all go home now and just digest what Willie's. Perhaps I'll just be silent for 20 minutes and allow you to digest that wonderful content. Willie, your third point about text was one that I've been relating to. Well, recently I'm learning French as an absolute beginner because to catch up with my daughter. And, there's using Duolingo, there's some great little stories in there. And there's a little story where a kid's, I'm an absolute beginner. And the story says to his dad, "Dad, you need to work harder." "Why, Junior? I work hard already." "Dad, we need a bigger house." "Why? Our house is already big." "Dad, we need a bigger car." "Why? We've got a big car." "Dad, we need more money." "Why, Junior? Why?" "Because Mama's having a baby." And Dad says, "What? Mama's having a baby? We need a bigger car. We need a bigger house," and so on. And I've probably listened to that little dialogue 20 times because every time I listen to it, it makes me chuckle. I don't understand all the words necessarily, but the content engages me, and it engages me repeatedly. So, Willie, that's my little anecdote in relation to the importance of text, which, captures your imagination. When your imagination's captured, you're in that state of flow where you overcome gaps in whatever grammar and stuff, and you're just caught up. And, you've really opened the floodgates to learning at that point.
Oh, I like
Okay, anyway, my presentation has got the rather obscure title, Less Information, More Insight. And it's kind of a memo to myself. So this is really, I'm actually talking to myself here because I tend to over-prepare and have far too many slides, far too much information, far too much content. And after all these years, it's a hard lesson to learn. And I'm going to talk about that lesson that I'm learning, and perhaps some of you can learn the same lesson. I think all of us could do well to give more attention to the process of learning and less to the information that we're trying to impart. Now, we all are caught up in curricula that are packed full of stuff that we have to get through. And I realize that our curricula are like slave drivers that drive us on. But I think if we can just take a breath and pay attention to some of the processes going on in the classroom, this can make a big difference. The conference, the webinar theme is contextualizing trends. And one of the, it's not really a trend, it's been around for 50 years, but one of the sort of themes which has been big in education for a long time is cooperative learning, right? Everybody knows that it's good, but how many of us do it well? How many of us actually do it well? And the secret to doing it well is paying attention to the process. I think one of the issues we face is that teachers often think that the pinnacle of teaching is being able to stand in front of the class and spout forth with all your erudite knowledge about grammar. Yay, I'm a good teacher. I think the best teacher is a teacher who facilitates learning. And if that facilitating learning means that the teacher says very, very little, who cares? Because ultimately we are judged by the quality of our teaching? No, by the quality of learning that happens in our classrooms. So that's what I'm going to share about. Let me now move to sharing my slides so you can see less of me. Okay. All right, less information, more insight. I'm going to tell you a story here about a lesson, in fact, that I taught just earlier this week, I think it was. So this is pretty fresh off the press. This is a lesson that involved the jigsaw arrangement. I'm guessing you're all familiar with the jigsaw arrangement. Learners start in just whatever groups they're in, and each learner is given a discrete piece of information or something that they have to study. And so they move into expert groups with other learners who've got the same information, and they explore that information together to make sure they've learned it, right? And then in step 2, they go back to their groups and each learner shares their information with the whole group. In other words, they put the jigsaw together. It might be that each learner, 1, 2, 3, and 4, has read a different text or a different paragraph from a text. This is a jigsaw arrangement. It's a classic example of cooperative learning. It's widely cited in the literature. Interestingly enough, I was taking my daughter into her Saturday after school job, as it were, this morning, and I said, I'm doing a seminar tonight. She said, oh, what's it about? I said, the jigsaw technique. And she said, I hate jigsaw technique. What? I said, why? She says, because I'd much rather just discuss things with the whole class. She says, sometimes I just find it's a waste of time and I can't be bothered. So, that was a salutary reminder that all the great theory and research falls apart sometimes in the reality of the classroom. And I suspect the reason she doesn't necessarily like it is perhaps because it hasn't been delivered or implemented in a way which maximizes student engagement. Just by the way, I'm assuming that you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
All right, so this is the activity that I ran in my class. This is an undergraduate class for TESOL students. So I'm not teaching them English. So you can extrapolate from this activity to your own context where you're teaching language learners. These are young students from around the world who are learning about TESOL. So in the jigsaw activity that I set for the class, they had to read 2 chapters from this wonderful book. Chapter 8 is on group work, chapter 9 is on cooperative learning. Half the class reads one chapter, half reads the other, right? Classic jigsaw. Then in class, this is a Zoom class, in the breakout rooms, I put the learners who'd read chapter 8 in small groups of 4 to talk about their chapter. I then moved them back into the main room and broke them up again into pairs. So now the learners were in pairs where one learner was a reader of chapter 8, one was a reader of chapter 9. All right, and they share their, oops, I just went to the end of my presentation then. I pressed the wrong button. Just bear with me and we'll just run back up. And then this whole class discussion. Great. All right. How does that sound to you how does it look as a sort of a lesson? Not too teacher-centered, you know, learners are active and involved in the learning. Ideally, it reflects some of the key principles of cooperative learning, which I'll share with you in a minute. Cooperative learning has been referred to as one of the great success stories in education. Getting learners to construct learning through engagement, through having to articulate what they're learning, to verbalize their understanding, to elaborate on their understanding. All of these cognitive operations that we know, and social interactive operations that we know are profoundly good for deepening knowledge. 4 key conditions that Kagan proposed many years ago. Positive independence. I need you and you need me. I need you to tell me about your chapter, otherwise I'm not going to know about it. Individual accountability. I am accountable for knowing enough about my chapter to give you something of value when I talk to you. Equal participation. We don't want one learner dominating. And simultaneous interaction, lots of learners engaging at the same time. Great. So without these qualities, group work can be an absolute waste of time. And I often say to teachers, you know, if you're not doing group work thoughtfully and well, and with a commitment, then just don't bother, because you'll just waste everybody's time. You know, and put your hand up, or maybe just put your mental hand up if you've been in a group work activity where you think, oh my God, what a waste of time. Huh? You know, so I'm not under the illusion that somehow it's a, you know, to use Willie's term, a magic bullet. We only have to get learners into groups and everything will just work magically. No, you'll waste a lot of time unless you've really committed to doing this to a high standard. Okay, so in terms of the jigsaw activity, which I'm assuming you will know about and I've just discussed, it fosters positive independence. It encourages learners to be accountable, right? I've got to know enough about my part of the information to be able to share back to my group. We've all got an equal piece of information, so we've all got a commitment and to participate equally. And of course, ideally, it's simultaneous interaction. However, in my class, I think it was Monday this week, that's right, it was Monday morning. In my class, didn't work very well. Not much individual accountability. Some students in the pairs spent all their time talking about their chapter and the other learner didn't have a chance to talk about their chapter. Didn't go very well. There was lots of simultaneous interaction. So here's me, having spent years talking about group work, you know, and I confess to you all now, it didn't go very well. And I want to explore with you why not, in the hope that we can all learn from this. So what went wrong? I think there were 3 things that were missing. And I think these are 3 keys that perhaps we can all reflect on in terms of our own teaching. The first thing is the learners weren't applying good group interaction skills. I put them into groups and I just said, there you go. I gave them no guidance, no encouragement to actually talk in a particular way and engage and interact in a particular way. How do we solve this problem? Well, learners need help, I think, to develop and use appropriate group interpersonal skills, especially in a second language context. So let's not take for granted when we put learners into groups that they're going to just beautifully flow and listen to each other. Sometimes we need to make explicit our expectations that learners will listen attentively. They will support and encourage each other. They will seek clarification. They will be active. In terms of the bringing these to play, putting these into play in the classroom, there's quite a number of strategies we can implement that are quite simple. So we can have a structured turn-taking organization of the group work. We can allocate time to each learner. We can do a bit of think, pair, share work before the activity so that each learner's got something to say. We can set rules. around how long people talk, who talks, whether learners can interrupt, how they ask questions. We can allocate roles. So there's a timekeeper or a group facilitator or a questioner. And as I've done here, we can split the information. But in this case, splitting the information in itself was not enough. So the first issue is that I didn't make explicit my expectations for the quality of cooperation and interaction. Number two, there was no clear outcome. And I think this is a problem we often fall into with so-called communicative tasks. I often see in textbooks, there'll be an activity that says discuss. Discuss your feelings about. It's just discuss. And the learners are put into pairs or groups to discuss. If they can't be bothered, there's no outcome. There's nothing to drive them forward. Why would they? So we need to make sure that there's an outcome that is valued, that is specific, and that learners are accountable for. And I think this is a key to effective group work. To achieve this outcome, we can draw on the principles of task-based language teaching, which if you've heard me talk about before, you'll know well. You know, task-based language teaching, 4 key features of a task. The learners are primarily trying to communicate messages. In doing so, there's a gap which makes other people want to listen. I've got information that you haven't got. We've got to agree on something that we may disagree on. And the gap there is an opinion gap. Learners need to bring their own resources to the table. They're not just reading a dialogue from the textbook. They've got to engage their own resources. And the task has to have an outcome other than just practicing language. And it's that number 4 there, which is the key here. Now, in my task, what outcome could I have added? Here's what I'm thinking I could have done. Think about a group work experience you've had. Read your chapter and analyze it. Sorry, it is the group work experience according to relevant principles from the chapter. Present your analysis to another person in a way that illustrates key principles from your chapter. So I'm kind of specifying what the outcome is, and I'm also making it more personalized because the learners have to not just spout forth information from the chapter, but they have to have processed it through their own experience, which is an incredibly important part of language learning. If we can attach language learning to rich experiences, learners can access the language they've been learning through those memories of experiences. After you've both shared, agree on a key insight from your talk to share, and share your insight in the chat line. So when we come back into the main room on Zoom, we've got a bunch of statements in the Zoom chat line that we can go through, and we can pick 1 or 2 to highlight. Notice a point here which is really important, at least in my context, in my experience, that online learning hasn't compromised my ability to do group work or cooperative learning. In fact, I've got to say, in some ways, I find it easier. I don't know about you. I know when you've got learners who don't have good access to the internet and they've all got their cameras turned off, it's really hard. But I've found with my students that Zoom breakout rooms and Zoom classes work really well for cooperative learning. Anyway, that's an aside.
So sorry to interrupt, Dr. Newton, but you have got 5 minutes left.
Easy. I've only got 1 more point to go.
All right,
I might even be early today. Where am I? So that's what I would have added to the jigsaw task that I ran in this class. I would have specified the outcome of the jigsaw arrangement, rather than just assume that if they've read different chapters, they'll come and they'll kind of talk about them and somehow learn from each other, which is going to lead to highly variable learning. I've specified the task and I've made them accountable for some kind of learning outcome. So specificity and accountability. Okay. I just popped this in here because this is a classic spot the differences kind of activity that is associated with communicative language teaching. You know, learners work in A-B pairs. Each learner's got a copy of the picture, but there are some differences in the picture. In this case, no, I hope I've got some differences in the picture. Okay, here we can see there's some books on the table in picture A, but not in picture B. What else can you see which is different?
The ceiling fan.
Ah, there's a ceiling fan.
Yes.
What else? Come on, one more thing.
Or the paintings on the wall.
The paintings on the wall are different.
Yes.
The flowers are different. There's a cat over there. Great.
Mm.
Just by the way, before I move on here, I'm interested in all of you listening, if you're still listening at the moment. When I asked you to look for the differences in that picture, what happened to your attention?
Oh, very focused.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
trying
it
very
wasn't
hard.
just, yeah. But, you know, Willie, I'm imagining, Willie, I imagine you were suddenly engaged in kind of, more agentively in doing something. Absolutely. You know, you were kind of, you weren't just sitting back there allowing my words to flow in one ear and out the other, but your sort of attention was focused and sort of, I suspect, not only focused, but also kind of activated at a higher level. And it's kind of curiosity and a little bit of excitement. Oh, and if I had said to you, you've got 30 seconds and you've got to find as many as you can, you know, I imagine those of you with a slightly competitive streak would have really got stuck in. Anyway, my point here is, in terms of the jigsaw technique, we can take that kind of technique and apply it to this sort of activity, which I think is often not done in a way which maximizes learning benefits. What do I mean? Well, when I used to teach with activities like this, I would just put learners in pairs, give the A's theirs, give the B's their pictures, and get them to do the activity. But what about if we put all the learners with A together in groups and all the learners with B together in groups and got them to talk about the picture that they all share and make sure they're all conversant with the vocabulary, Pak Willie, which is what you're talking about, and with the grammar they need to describe their picture, right? So you give learners an opportunity to sort of talk about their picture together, to build their skills, to build their fluency in talking about the picture, and then they go into the split information activity. I think that can lead to really profound improvements in learning outcomes, because what it's doing is it's giving learners the opportunity for rehearsal, and through that rehearsal to streamline and to expand their linguistic resources. So that's, in a sense, what I'm saying is do these kind of tasks using the jigsaw technique to really strengthen learning outcomes. There are other ways to do it, but that's just a thought. Oh, excuse me. I'm going to skip over that slide. We haven't got time. My third and final problem that I think typified this lesson or characterized this lesson is that there was no reflection or evaluation of group processes. Why is that important, you might ask? Well, in cooperative learning, learners reflect not only on what they've learned, but on the process of learning. An important outcome of cooperative learning is that learners are learning to be cooperative. And it's important that they develop those skills if we want cooperative learning to be an ongoing part of our classroom teaching and learning process. So the solution is to get learners to reflect on the process so that every time they do a group task, they're identifying what they've done well and what they could do better next time. So ideally at the end of a semester, you've got learners who are really efficient at actually doing cooperative learning. You know, if they get better at doing cooperative learning, they're going to be better at learning full stop, and they're going to learn more. So how well did I support the learning of others? How well did the group listen and resolve differences? How could I or we cooperate better next time? So an opportunity to reflect on the experience of cooperative learning is really important. Now, in my case, it was kind of useful because the topic of the lesson was cooperative learning. I was able to, after the not particularly successful jigsaw task, I was able to introduce the principles of cooperative learning and say, now go back into your breakout rooms and analyze your experience according to these principles. So that's great. You know, the one thing we did well is we actually managed to get some evaluation in there. You know, what criteria were met, what criteria were not met, and what could we do better next time. Now, these students are learning to be teachers, so this is a really great reflective opportunity for them through their experience to build their knowledge and awareness of how to run effective cooperative learning. I'm almost finished. That's my timer telling me I should be finished. In conclusion, as I said, cooperative learning is one of the great success stories in education. The point I'm making here, we need to take seriously the need to develop our expertise in cooperative learning. And importantly, the expertise of our learners. Fostering that expertise over time. If things don't go well to begin with, identify what the issues are and keep on trying. As teachers, we're learners of teaching. And I've been doing this for far too long, but I'm still learning, as you can see. So today we talked about the 4 conditions this evening of cooperative learning, the PIES conditions, and I've added 3 more that I think are important. Making group skills explicit, making sure the objective is clear and learners are accountable for achieving it, and giving learners the opportunity to reflect on group processes. So those were my 3 learning lessons as a teacher from this lesson, and I'm just taking this opportunity to share them with you in the hope that some of you will think, yeah, I could learn from that as well. So on that note, I shall finish. Less information, more insight. I'm encouraging you to reflect on what's going on in your classroom, reflect on the processes of learning and teaching as you're teaching. Some of the ideas that I've talked about here are in this book that just a very small booklet really, that I wrote for the Regional English Language Centre, sorry, the Regional Language Centre in Singapore, the last year or the year before, using tasks in language teaching. So that's all from me. Thank you very much, everybody. I shall end.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jonathan, for addressing this wonderful topic. You've shared with us, or should I say reminded us, that we should judge ourselves as good educators based on the quality of the learning that takes place in the class rather than quality of teaching. You shared with us your experiences on using cooperative learning and group work and how the group work did not go as planned, and you chose to analyze what was missing and address it by creating opportunities for equal turn-taking, think and write time, create gaps in communication, use the jigsaw technique so that there is a real purpose for students to speak to each other. And as well reflect upon the process of the cooperative learning to maximize teaching and learning. Thank you so much, Dr. Jonathan. I would like to remind our participants again to post your questions on Mentimeter. I believe that the speakers would love to answer your questions in the Q&A session later. And another quick reminder, each participant joining us today will get more information on how you can receive a free participation certificate from the AsiaTEFL and the Q&A session. Sorry, after the Q&A session. Please stay tuned and enjoy the webinar. And we have come to our 3rd and last speaker. Please allow me to introduce Dr. Ju Seong Lee. Dr. Ju Seong Lee is the Assistant Professor and Associate Head of the Department of English Language Education at the Education University of Hong Kong, specializing in computer-assisted language learning, particularly in extramural call contexts, emotions, and motivation in language learning, as well as English as an international language. He has also published materials on digital learning English. Dr. Ju will be sharing with us on using an intelligent personal assistant and informal digital learning of English to supplement ELT. Please join me in welcoming our third speaker. Over to you, Dr. Ju.
Thank you, Dr. Tambir, for your kind moderation. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, thank you. It's my great honor and pleasure to present this webinar with Dr. Willie Renandier and Dr. Jonathan Newton. I also appreciate the webinar chair, Dr. Kitpat and Dr. Prakasi, and President Professor Killian Lee and Lavinder Gargesh and other vice presidents of the AsiaTEFL for organizing this wonderful event. My name is Ju Sung, and in this 20-minute presentation, I'll discuss how informal digital learning of English or IDLE into formal school settings. IDLE can be understood as self-directed English activities in informal digital contexts. So it's mostly motivated by personal interest, and it's performed without being assessed by a school teacher in the schools, formal school systems. So for example, my good Indonesian friend says, oh, her daughter spends hours spending playing digital games every day with another Indonesian friend. But they use English in a fun, interactive, and immersive manner.
Fancy. Yeah, right. What? Yeah, I'm doing. Ashley.
Language learning and teaching beyond the classroom, or LBC, is a theoretical framework that can help us understand this emerging phenomenon, IDLE. And LBC can be further divided into LBC online and offline, and LBC online. So depending on where the language learning takes place. And the black dots represent the affiliations of researchers who have conducted the LBC research on English language. So extramural English, for example, has been extensively researched in Nordic regions, and early research focused on the young English learners, but more recent study is paying attention to the teachers. So this is most recent study published in Applied Linguistics on this topic. Moving down, the online informal learning of English is a term used to describe EFL informal language learners in France and Germany. And there are some books on this topic have been published. In Asia, informal digital learning of English has been studied mainly in Korea, Indonesia, and Taiwan. And it has been recently been expanded to Iran. And Professor Chun Lai and her colleagues have been actively researching this LBC in Hong Kong and mainland China. And Pang and her associates use informal mobile language learning to gain a person-centered perspective of this phenomenon. So they basically monitor the individual learner's developmental trajectory of their activity. And it's worth noting that this year alone, these papers on LBC have been published in Applied Linguistics, so including this one and the other one from Europe. And red dots indicate the affiliations of researchers who have conduct LBC research in languages other than English, such as Korean. This is Korean, and like Spanish, Japanese. This is Korean. Chinese, French, Russian, Spanish, and Russian. Several books on LBC have been edited by renowned scholars, including Professor Phil Benson, Hayo Reinders, David Noonan, and Jack Richards. And to my knowledge, more edited books will be released in the near future. And idle and extramural language learning were the subject of 2 review papers. And accordingly, around 80% of LBC research have been conducted in Asia and Europe. And the majority of research concentrate on the English language. And special issue have been published on this topic in Calico, Language Learning and Technology, and TESOL Journal. The LBC framework on which IDLE is conceptually based have been proposed and validated by Benson and Reinders and several others. So what are the potential synergies between this IDLE and formal ELT? IDLE offers several advantages in terms of accessibility, authenticity, and multimodality. And from the standpoint of positive psychology, IDLE also benefits our EFL learners in many ways. And consequently, as Dr. Willie mentioned, it can create an optimal environment for comprehensive and meaningful input and output for our EFL learners. The Asian second language learners reported the lowest levels of enjoyment and the highest levels of communication anxiety among second language learners worldwide. And this data makes sense, right? Because English is an important subject for school grades and high-stake national tests in exam-oriented Asian EFL countries. So policymakers, school leaders, teachers, parents, publishers, and students, and our children are all affected. So in that regard, this informal language practice has the potential to increase enjoyment while decreasing anxiety among Asian EFL learners. So in line with the positive psychology movement in SLA, the second language researchers have begun to shift their long-held focus from negative emotions, such as anxiety, to positive ones, such as enjoyment. I think it's a good sign because it allows us to consider both positive and negative aspects of second language emotions so that we can take a more balanced and a holistic approach to understanding our EFL learners' second language emotions. So inspired by positive psychology in SLA movement, we developed and tested this hypothesis using self-reported data. And we found that the enjoyment and anxiety to mediate the relationship between idle activities and their willingness to communicate in a second language among Korean EFL learners. I think these findings are quite encouraging, but we use a separate reported data like many other the LBC studies. I looked at 76 papers that published over the last 10 years. But we have to be very careful because separate reported data is vulnerable to recall bias because the participants' responses are based on their memories. So recently, to address this methodological limitation, our research team used the experience sampling method, or ESM. So that is for 2 weeks, 14 days. So 10 Hong Kong University students responded to 5 social media messages each day, reporting their idle activities, enjoyment, anxiety, and their willingness to communicate levels during times like here. And we gather 700 data sets. And as illustrated in these figures, the individual participant idle frequency or duration varies, right? As shown in this table, there is a big gap or discrepancy between their separate reported survey data and their ESM data on idle frequency. So what does it mean? This ESM data can more accurately reflect participants' idle activities, which enhance the reliability of the findings. And this pilot study also support our previous model. So it means that the more EFL learners engaged in this informal digital learning outside of the classroom, the more joy they feel about learning English, and the less anxious they become about speaking English. As a result, they become more willing to speak in English inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. Then how can formal ELT education or teachers promote and support IDLE? And IDLE can be integrated in extracurricular or extramural context. And IDLE in extracurricular context, let's assume your target students struggle with English speaking and pronunciation, but all of your students have smartphones. And you can ask them to download and use a Google Assistant to practice English speaking outside of the classroom in a fun, interactive ways. But 2 things are important here. Teachers must carefully design tasks, and students' performance needs to be evaluated somehow later. So let me show you some tasks designed by Hong Kong teachers. So this one is a control activity.
Hey, Google.
Hey, Hannah, how can I help?
Climbed.
I found these results.
Watched.
Here are some results from the web.
Talked.
According to Wikipedia, conversation is interactive communication between.
So student can get a self-correction or immediate feedback from the AI. So this is for pronunciation practice. And this is more, I think this activity is more for advanced level.
Google, I am going to read a tongue twister to you.
I'd love to hear a tongue twister. If you want me to tell you one afterwards, let me know.
Betty Butter bought some butter, but she said, this butter's bitter. If I put it in my batter, it will make my batter bitter. So Betty Butter bought some butter, better than her butter, and put it in her batter, and it made her bitter batter bitter.
This is the top result.
Google, I want you to find an online stopwatch.
Opening web page.
Betty bought Google.
This is guided tasks.
Hey Google.
Hi, how can I help you this afternoon?
What was the temperature in Hong Kong yesterday?
Yesterday in Hong Kong, there was a high of 27 and a low of 24.
Thank you, Google. What did you do yesterday?
My day was great, thanks for asking. I reread the entire internet again, learned more about how human beings are able to swim, and that bowling was invented as early as 3200 BC.
What else did you do yesterday?
Yesterday was great. Watched some YouTube videos, translated stories, played games. I love my job.
This is another guided task.
So I'm going to ask you some questions.
Ooh, I'd love it if you asked me something.
Give me a recipe with bacon in it.
Okay, here are some recipes.
Google, where can you buy pancakes?
The pantry. Here you go.
So I'm going to ask you.
And
Hey Google.
there are several other tasks, but due to the time constraint, I'll skip. And the idle in extramural setting, students can select their own English learning objectives, materials, and strategies. So it's motivated by their own needs and interests. So a Hong Kong secondary school teacher, for example, organized a 14-day extramural English or idle challenge during this pandemic online teaching period. So around 15 students participated, and they create the Padlet to showcase their idle practice daily, and no corrective feedback was provided. So for example, the Mary here wanted to improve her speaking skill. So to that end, she downloaded a dubbing app and select her favorite movies, dramas, and talks. She mimicked the content, added her voice, upload her audio recorded video, and she did it for 45 days. So I think it does not work.
I am an emotional creature. Why would you want to shut me down or turn me off? I am your remaining memory. I can take you back. Nothing's been diluted. Nothing's leaked out. I love, hear me, I love that I can feel the feelings inside you. Even if they stop my life, even if they break my heart, even if they take me off track, they make me responsible. I am an emotional, unconditional, devotional creature.
Some students continue until day 82. So it's all voluntary activity. And there are several barriers to integrating this drastic idea into a formal system, like individual teachers' mindset, beliefs, attitude, the prior experience with either all play a role. And this pedagogy, either pedagogy can be influenced by school environment, such as principals, colleagues, and parents' perceptions about this idea. Of course, policy and culture do play a role. But I met several teachers who know the idle works, but are hesitant to use it in the classroom due to one or more of some of these external factors. So I call it a pedagogical dilemma. But let's be honest, it works actually. For example, Korean parents who successfully raised a bilingual child in their idle supported home environment share their stories and strategies. Like a father of Hyunse, claimed that he has selected English YouTube videos for her daughter and let her watch for at least 1 hour every day since age 4. And oops.
안녕하세요, 현사빠입니다. 그동안
My present is
Became year 8 and she speaks English. Turn off the camera.
Okay, let's make this Legos. Okay, let's start. There is a tent. Many packs. 10 packs are in here. And 10 packs. This is all the Lego.
So like outside of the formal school system, actually people are implementing this idea. The Goodwin-Jones envisions 3 future scenarios for future language education. And the first scenario is that the language learning is no longer required due to technological advancement. And the second scenario is that the language learning is required, but not from formal instruction. Our customers, our students, might not attend a formal school to learn a language. Rather, they practice using more affordable and convenient language apps like Duolingo. The third scenario involves the merging of informal and formal language learning. So he claims the viability of the formal language instruction will persist only if we as language educators embrace technological progress and provide opportunities for our students to engage in extramural language development. So what do you think? I support the third scenario as predicted by Goodwin-Jones. So teachers who can use technology effectively in and outside of the classroom will continue to be in high demand. So today I share some of my thoughts on technology and ELT. I hope we can continue to discuss this topic here and elsewhere. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ju, for your enlightening talk on using Google Assistant and IDLE in the ELT classroom. Dr. Ju has shown us how these tools can help increase learners' enjoyment and decrease speaking anxiety, which results in greater willingness to communicate in English. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please do post your questions in Mentimeter for Dr. Ju. As it is time for the Q&A session. I received many questions. We have received many questions here. Give me a second for me to read out the question.
Choose easy ones for me and difficult ones for Jonathan and Chu Seong.
All right. Okay. Okay. The first question I think is for Dr. Willie. Dr. Willie, can explicit knowledge of grammar become implicit? Can you talk a bit about the interface between the two? I'll repeat the question. Dr. Willie, okay. Can explicit knowledge of grammar become implicit? Thank you.
It's a very, very tricky question. I think this is the kind of question that Jonathan should answer. There's been a lot of debates about whether there's this possibility that some explicit knowledge can become implicit. I would say yes, to some extent, and a small number of our grammatical knowledge, explicit grammatical knowledge, and also vocabulary knowledge can become implicit through practice, basically. So if you go for the skill learning theory, it is possible for basically turning everything that you initially learn as a declarative piece of knowledge into procedural knowledge. It's possible. But I think of late, people have been saying that the grammar is just too complex. The grammar of the language is just too complex. And what we teach in the classroom is only a very tiny, small part of it. So yes, a small part of it can become implicit, but the bulk of our grammar knowledge, implicit grammar knowledge that enables us to, to produce the language for a variety of purposes, it's much, much broader than that. So I would not even, encourage people to investigate whether or not a certain explicit knowledge of grammar can become implicit. I think that is something that is theoretically interesting, but I would say for practical purposes, and people like Jonathan and I are practical people, we would like to focus more on what is there for us, in terms of what we can learn from years and years and years of research. If you ask researchers, they will tell you, well, more research is needed. For me, I think we know enough. I think we know enough, but it's just that we have not done enough to apply what we have learned for the past 50 years. I think that is the challenge for us. We need to apply the best insights from research that we now know. Yeah, for more research, like the interface between explicit and implicit knowledge, leave it to SLA theorists.
I think that I agree with you, Willie. I think the position which is most useful is to say that explicit knowledge is an aid to, aid to noticing the forms or structures in the input, but it's the processing of the input as meaning, as message. That is the side of learning, but the rules aid in the noticing of what's going on.
Yeah, maybe a more useful way of thinking about this implicit explicit is this. At the early stage, up to intermediate level of English language proficiency, I think we should focus more, really more, on developing our students' implicit knowledge. And once they become comfortable with the familiar grammatical structures and vocabulary words, then we can start adding on, some explicit instruction to sort of refine, extend the students' ability to make use of the more complex grammatical features of the language. I think that part comes a bit later. And that is where we need, or our service is badly needed in the classroom, helping our students to extend.
I think we need another AsiaTEFL webinar just on this topic, because it's huge. But it
is, isn't it? Yes.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Dr. Willie and Dr. Jonathan. There's another question. I think this is directed to you, Dr. Jonathan. Would you mind giving us a suggestion on how to enhance students' motivation when we conduct a particular collaborative activity, since not all students are engaged, especially the weaker students?
And my daughter. So I think start with really small tasks that are achievable and have success outcomes guaranteed. So, start with, and make them fun, lively, short, timed, focused. The classic rules of good group work or good cooperative learning: structure, structure, structure. If you make it loose, go into groups for 5 minutes and discuss blah, no wonder the learners aren't motivated. But if it's really tightly structured, really clear outcome, and it's fun, so I think it's all about managing motivation from manipulating motivation using those techniques. I mean, having said that, motivation is a very complex, dynamic, individual variable, and some learners just don't like you, and no matter what you do, they don't want to be in your class. And don't feel guilty about that. Don't feel like you've got to wear that.
Let me just add just one point. The principles of cooperative learning that Jonathan shared earlier on, one of the most important, I think, is the first one, which is positive interdependence. If we are able to apply that principle, in a group work situation, I think chances are very high that the students will be motivated. It's about, hey, there's something that I know, and there's something that the other person knows that I don't know. And if we work together, and we have to work together, we have to be motivated to work together. Otherwise, we won't be able to achieve anything. So I know something that you don't know, and you know something that I don't know. We should work together. I mean, that is a very broad principle in life as well. We work together with other people because we want to know something. that we don't know from that other people know. I hope that's not confusing. That is the idea behind positive interdependence. Once that principle is there, I think chances are very high that students will be motivated. Of course, there's always this 10% of the students. It doesn't matter what you do; they are not interested in doing anything in the classroom. We can just leave them aside.
Thank you.
And
thank
respect their feeling of demotivation.
Thank you, Dr. Willie and Dr.
Yeah.
Jonathan. Another question is a very interesting one. Speaking about the current stigma in the society that most people and even educational institutions still cling towards native speakers. How do we break such barriers when native English speakers still hold its supremacy over non-native English speakers?
So very classic question. I think at the theoretical level, the problem has been solved. If you speak to people, whose work you have read in the literature, all of them will say it doesn't really make such a big difference whether you learn from a native speaker or from a non-native speaker, as long as both are equally effective, as long as both are equally efficient. I think that's the key thing. In terms of how society at large view native and non-native speakers, I think that would be a very difficult issue to resolve. I think parents, for example, are always keen to send their kids to language schools taught fully by native speakers of English. Yeah, but I think we can play a part. We can start also telling people, educating people to some extent, telling them that it doesn't really matter whether you learn English from Jonathan or from me. We are equally good. Jonathan is slightly better, but we are equally good.
Far from it.
I think that message will have to be communicated by us. The majority of the people here are bilingual, competent bilingual, or even multilingual people. We need to increase our professionalism as a teacher, as a language teacher.
One way to get around this is to get rid of the labels and talk about bilingual teachers and monolingual teachers.
Yes.
Right? So,
yes,
Willie,
absolutely. Yes. Yes.
And Dr. Lee, you are bilingual teachers.
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to share one experience.
Or trilingual, multilingual, sorry.
I'm working with the future English teachers. And then when I asked them about this issue, I received very interesting feedback. Like during their secondary school period, they used to think they must speak like native speakers because this belief was reinforced by the English teacher, and that's what the expectation of the society. Yeah. But they became a university student, and they experienced various types of Englishes on the internet, and they made international friends who spoke Indian English, Chinese English, Singaporean English, and they watch like Indian movies such as Three Idiots. They play online game with people from all over the world, and they became very open-minded, those people. And what's most interesting is they become more proud of their own English accent. And then they say, oh, they are more willing to teach or integrate these EIM materials into their future classrooms. I think this little exposure and enhancing the awareness of this issue is a first step we can do as a teacher educator. Because when their beliefs become changed, I think it may affect their intention and also their behavior. That's my just little experience here.
Okay, another question. Thank you all. Another question, I think this is directed to Dr. Ju. How do we encourage teachers to use EdTech tools in the ELT classroom?
You mean the technology?
Yes, yes.
So good question, because I'm teaching primary school teacher and secondary school teacher in Hong Kong. And when they come to my class, they are quite anxious about technology. Some teacher, especially some seasoned teacher with over 25 years experience, don't know how to create Google account. So they are very anxious about technology. So I think first step is they need to have some positive enjoyment or achievement. Like when they create some new simple app using some technology, I think teacher need to give them a lot of encouragements. Like, wow, like something like that. Oh, I like it very much. And then it actually increase, it help them have more positive emotions toward technology. Second one is, I think, give them a sense of confidence because they are afraid of making mistakes. Even though they are teachers, they're working with other colleagues, the fellow teachers, and they are afraid of making mistakes. Believe it or not, they are very shy. So I think give them some doable, attainable tasks with technology so that they can gain, they can increase a sense of control and the capacity using technology in the classroom. I think last one is very important. That is a subjective, I think the environment they are in, like the school they're coming from, maybe not favorable for technology. Maybe principals are very conservative. I know they ban use of mobile device in the school. In that, when teacher work in that environment, I don't think a teacher are willing to embrace new technology. So in that regard, I think the teacher need to make efforts to create some optimal environment where like-minded people can work together and thrive together. So like positive attitude toward technology and good environment for technology and some ease of use of technology or several achievement of technology can affect their intention to use technology, and then they are more likely to use it in the future classroom.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr.
Maybe
Chu.
if I can make just one or two small points about
Dr.
technology. Point number one, I think we need to tell teachers, especially beginning teachers or the more experienced teachers who've been teaching for maybe 30 years, who don't know much about technology. I think tell them very clearly that it is not the technology that makes the difference. It's the pedagogy. It's how we use the technology that can make a huge difference. That's point number one. Point number two, tell them to find very easy to use tech tools. Very easy. The easier, the better. So stay away from the more complex, difficult to use tech tools. Well, later, once they've developed, proficiency in using these tech tools, they can learn, how to use the more difficult ones. And point number three, of course, for the majority of people in this room, find those that are free. I think that's very important. So free, easy to use, and think about the pedagogy that you want to use behind those technological tools. I think very, very important to remember.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Billy. I think that's very useful. We have about 1 minute, so I'm going to ask one last question. When a student doesn't use grammar correctly, is it best to correct them or let it be to encourage them to speak?
Okay, this is very much related to my point about teaching grammar, teaching plus correcting grammar. I think we have been overdoing it. We teach too much grammar and we correct too much grammar, especially at the early stage of learning, when the students are still developing. I think we should not spend too much time teaching explicit grammar or even correcting students' grammar. Let them develop confidence. Let them develop this sufficient foundation of linguistic system in their head that allows them to actually use the language. Let them experience the language first. At that point, after that point has been achieved, then we can start sort of teaching the grammar of the language. Because the first initial, type of grammar that the students need will be the implicit, the kind of grammar that is difficult to explain actually. You can't really explain all the rules that help you speak the way you do. Because most of the time, this is again from research, proficient speakers like you, like me, have hundreds and hundreds or even thousands of fixed expressions in our head, known as lexical bundles. And these basically are the grammar of, the kind of grammar that enable us to speak and to produce language, smoothly and efficiently. And this is the kind of grammar that cannot be taught, actually. So go easy on grammar teaching and go easy on grammar correction. Let me get back to what Jonathan said early on. Less is more. Teach less so that the students can learn more. I think that is a very, very important principle for us to remember. Teach less, teachers. When you teach less, it doesn't mean that you are doing a bad job in the classroom. It is when you teach more, maybe you are doing a bad job if you teach more in the classroom. Like 80% of your time is you talking to your students. Very bad. Very, very bad.
Thank you.
Maswin, you are nodding your head, yeah?
Thank you very much. I think that we have already passed the 15 minutes limit for the Q&A session, and you're going to end the Q&A session now. On behalf of AsiaTEFL organization, I would like to thank the speakers of the second webinar today for their great presentations and insightful discussion on the theme, Augmenting the Pedagogical Landscape in ELT, Contextualizing the Trends. And of course, thank you all to our wonderful participants who joined us today. And just a quick reminder that our webinar hasn't finished yet. I have five important announcements to make. My first announcement is regarding the certificate for today's webinar. Please scan the QR code to access a link to a form and fill up your details there to receive your certificate. The form will be accessible for 15 minutes. The certificate will not be reissued, so please make sure that you fill up this form correctly. I will repeat that. The certificate will not be reissued, so please make sure that you fill up the form correctly. The second announcement is about the AsiaTEFL Annual International Conference. The 20th AsiaTEFL International Conference 2022 will be held in Universitas Negeri Malang, East Java, Indonesia, from the 5th to the 7th of August. The conference will be in a hybrid form, and the theme of the conference is Hindsight, Insight, and Foresight in ELT in Multilingual Asia. The third announcement is about our next webinar. The third AsiaTEFL webinar will be held on 30th July 2022. The theme of our third webinar is Material Design and Development in ELT, Empowering New Initiatives. We will keep you updated about the speakers and other details soon via our website, www.asiatefl.org, or our Facebook page, AsiaTEFL Association. The fourth announcement is not really an announcement, but rather some words of appreciation. I would like to thank all our AsiaTEFL Professional Network Committee members who work behind the scenes to ensure the webinar series is a success. Our team is headed by our Vice President, Associate Professor Dr. Pragasit Sititiko. As seen on the screen, these are the 17 committee members from Malaysia and Thailand who have worked together to ensure the webinar series 2022 is conducted successfully. And the last announcement is about our group photo. We would like to spend a couple of minutes taking a group photo. If you all please turn on your cameras and show us your beautiful smiles. Thank you. Please, Kitty Pat, my colleague, my dearest colleagues, Kitty Pat.
Okay, I'll be the cameraman.
Yes, please.
Okay, we've got 4 pages. Let's start with the first page together. 1, 2, 3. Okay. More, please. Next page. page. 1, 2, 3. Keep smiling. Okay. Last one. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kitty Pat. Thank you very much, everyone. Just before we leave, there's one last announcement I've been asked to make. It's regarding the recording of a webinar. The recording of the webinar is available on our AsiaTEFL YouTube channel and our AsiaTEFL website. All right. So this is the end of the second AsiaTEFL Webinar 2022. And on behalf of the AsiaTEFL Professional Network Committee, I would like to thank everyone again for your participation and hope to see you in the next webinar in July. Till then, stay safe and take care. Bye for now.